This podcast is about introducing our fans to the animals, plants, and other products that we work with at Josh's Frogs. It's an opportunity to paint a picture of our hobby that is refreshing. We want you guys to be successful with the animals that you're keeping, and we want our hobby to grow ethically and sustainably into the future. Hello and welcome to the Josh's Frogs podcast. Today I've got Amelia on again. We're going to talk about crown tree frogs today. But before we do that, just want to let you know that the Josh's Frogs podcast is brought to you by Josh's Frogs. We're your one-stop shop. We not only carry captive bred amphibians, reptiles, and pet bugs, but we carry everything you need to take care of them. So everything from substrate to caging to lighting to the live plants that go in with those animals. And then we also carry all the live feeders you need to take care of those animals as well. On top of that, we'd like you to be educated and confident in taking care of those animals. So we produce a lot of how-to guides and blog articles and videos and all that kind of stuff. So check us out at joshsfrogs.com. So without further ado, welcome, Amelia. Will you remind us, if this is the first episode that somebody's listened to with you on it, how long you've been at Josh's Frogs and what do you do here?
I've been here for a little over 3 years now, and I'm a tree frog and toad keeper.
Awesome. And so what are the species that you work with on a regular basis that here?
I work with a lot of the different things that we have in the department to some extent. I do stuff with most of the toads. The Solomon leaf frogs are a big one. The crown tree frogs we're about to talk about today. Just got started on trying to revamp the glass frog project. Hopefully that'll pan out for us in a few months here. Cool.
Awesome. Talk to us a little bit about crown tree frogs. What are they? How are they different than some of the other frogs? What's a crown tree frog?
So they're kind of a medium-sized brown tree frog with these big amber eyes, dark brown to black spots, and a row of spikes along the back of the head that gives them that name. They're actually closely related to the duckbill tree frogs. There's only 3 species in the genus Triprion. The crowns are Triprion spinosus, referring to those spines, obviously, and then it's just the duckbills, Triprion pedicellus and spatulatus. So those two look pretty similar to each other. You can tell they're related. And then there's these crowns that just look wildly different.
Cool. Do you know where they're at from, where they live in the world? Where are they native to?
They are in southeastern Mexico, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Panama.
Oh, cool. So Central America area. All right. Talk a little bit about size. You talked a little bit about their crown, but how big are they? What are some other distinguishing marks about them?
So if you're familiar with our masked tree frogs, they're around the size of those, just a little bit slimmer bodied. They don't start out with the crowns. The babies are a little bit more of a gray. They're just kind of smooth, and then the crown starts to develop around 3 to 4 months of age.
Cool. Now, how would somebody set up a crown tree frog enclosure? How is it similar or different than what we would do with red eyes or whites or one of those other common tree frogs?
You could do a setup that's similar to a red-eyed tree frog setup. You want to definitely be sure to provide them with some cork tubes or similar for hiding spots. Large water dish if you go that route. They like water. Or you can actually keep them on a water bottom if you have the ability to do water changes on that kind of a setup. That's what we do here at work, and it's just so that they can go ahead and breed right in their enclosures.
Cool. Talk to us a little bit about breeding. How are we triggering them to breed? What are we doing special to get them to lay? And kind of walk us through that process.
So it's really just very hands-off. There's not a lot that we need to do besides keep them clean and throw food at them. They'll kind of seasonally go through rounds of breeding once or twice a year. And they actually raise their offspring. So we leave the tadpoles right in the tanks with the parents. They'll go and lay a few eggs at a time around the top of the water or on the surfaces of cork flats and tubes and wood and stuff in the water. And then after those hatch, once they've gotten established a little bit, the female frog will go down into the water and soak herself, and the tadpoles will start nibbling on her, and that actually cues her to lay more infertile eggs for them to eat, and that's their main food source. They'll also eat like waste from the parents and stuff that drop into the water, but they don't have like a standard kind of tadpole diet because they're usually being laid in like tree hollows and bromeliads and stuff out in the wild where there's not a whole community of plants and insects and stuff for them to feed on.
Now, how big are the clutch sizes and how often are they laying?
They're pretty small. They'll kind of produce what they're going to go for like around usually kind of over the course of a week or so. They do have a pretty naturally low survival rate, even in the wild. A lot of the eggs don't end up hatching. A lot of the tadpoles don't end up morphing. So if you try and breed them at home and you're seeing way smaller success amounts, I guess, than you would with other frogs, that's not necessarily any fault of your own. They just do that.
Wow.
And they'll cannibalize and stuff. So
Cool.
they just kind of take whatever they can get and the strongest survive.
That's cool. That's cool. I love how they have parental care, but not only that, but doing it inside the terrarium that you're keeping them in. Talk a little bit about size. How big are the frogs, and then how big are the enclosures that we're keeping them in, and what types of groups are we keeping together?
The frogs are around 3 inches roundabout. There's not really a very dramatic difference between males and females. We keep them in the Exoterra 18 by 18 by 24 tank, so you could do like 1 to 4 frogs in there.
Cool.
They're extremely difficult to sex, so we don't have exact sex ratios or anything that we go for that we recommend because you really are only going to be able to probably sex them by running a whole DNA analysis or just doing a lot of observations and recording behaviorally which frogs seem like they're taking which roles, calling or amplexing or stuff like that. The males will actually sometimes shove each other around with those crowns, which is pretty neat.
Oh, that's cool.
But they don't really have visual nuptial pads. They don't have visible ureters, throat sacs. There's not an extreme size difference.
Interesting.
So it's really, really difficult to actually sex them.
Interesting. Now you talked about a water base on the tanks. Can you talk us through what's the process? How are you feeding them then? Since there's water on the bottom, how do you keep the crickets from just all drowning in the water? Like, talk us through that process. What's the best way to navigate that when you're feeding?
So since we have a lot of wood in these tanks piled up, you can usually just sprinkle the crickets after they've been dusted with the supplement onto the wood for them to catch. If you didn't have as much kind of hardscape in there, you could also do what we do for a lot of our other frogs that we keep on water, where we just take like a little like a kind of a deli tray kind of a thing and put a little bit of damp paper towel in the bottom of that so it's not super slippery, and then put the crickets in that and float it around like a little boat. That's not usually necessary for these guys.
The cricket boat. I love it. The cricket cruise. That's awesome. You talked a lot about a bunch of different wood in the tank. Are you doing any live plants or anything like that in there as well too, or fake plants, anything like that for cover? Or is it all just woodscape?
Not currently. Some of our tanks, we've been able to get it to work with live pothos, so we do still have that, but a lot of the other ones, it hasn't really worked out so well. You kind of want to have a more established plant that can be immersed if you put it in that kind of way, because they'll kind of trample them at night and stuff, and they've drowned a lot of philodendrons and things that I've tried to put in their tanks, but some really long pothos that can be wound over the branches and stuff as well has been an option.
That's cool.
And probably if you were taking the time to really build out something, and maybe for a smaller number of frogs at home just as a permanent enclosure, you could figure out some ways to prop things up a little bit more securely. So there's options.
Cool. Could you talk a little bit about age to breeding? How old are they typically getting before they start calling and before they start breeding? Is it typical of what we would expect with red eyes, whites, those kinds of frogs as well too?
Yeah, you can usually start to notice that around 8 to 10 months. I don't know that we've tried breeding them that young here necessarily. They're kind of like a lot of things in the larger tree frog sort of range, where most of the growth is completed in the first year, and then you might see just a little bit beyond that.
Cool. Cool. Um, Somebody's considering keeping crown tree frogs. Why would you steer them to those as opposed to something else? Is there anything that you would say, hey, these are different in this regard, and you should think about crown tree frogs versus some of the other frogs? Like, what would you say to somebody who's like, hey, I'm trying to decide between a white tree frog, a red eye, and a crown tree frog? Like, what would you say would be the considerations they need to make?
Between, say, those species that you just mentioned, these guys are going to have the least obtrusive call, if that's something that's consideration. They just kind of have this soft, like, boop, boop kind of a call.
I love that.
And they're not very common in the hobby. They're really underrated because they're just brown. They're a very pretty shade of brown. They're a nice chocolate color, but so they're not something that a lot of people have. If you want to do a home breeding project, these are a great option for that because they produce a manageable amount of offspring for one household, and they've got that really unique process to watch, and they do most of the work themselves.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that they can tend to be more naturalistically set up with a water bottom. Makes it a little bit easier to make it look really cool in that tank as well, instead
Definitely.
of more of a sterile look for the tank. So that's really cool. All right. Anything else you want to tell us about crown tree frogs before we go to the lightning round?
So kind of like I've said with most of the frogs that I've talked about here, we do a lot of nocturnal species in this department. These guys especially, you want to feed them very last thing in the day, preferably after the lights are already off because they're very shy eaters and won't go for food usually earlier in the day. So that way you can make sure that they're actually going to be getting their calcium and vitamin supplements while it's still on the crickets before they have a chance to knock it off and stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for educating us on this. I would say a little bit more rare, a little bit more obscure tree frog species that's in our hobby that hopefully will be much more popular in the future. We're going to do a lightning round. You've done these before, so if you don't know the answer to one of these questions or can't think of something on the spot, just pass. But otherwise, give us what first comes to your mind. So if money and space were no issue, what's the next pet that you would have?
Trying to think of something I haven't said before.
Something new.
Right. Guess I'd probably go for some kind of like a more active kind of diurnal like snake or something like that, like maybe some kind of colubrid, but could go with something really large and dramatic if, money and space weren't an issue. Just build an absolutely tricked out zoo kind of an enclosure for
That'd
it
be cool.
and stuff. So most of my pets I have at home are nocturnal,
Yep.
so having a little bit more out during the day would be nice.
That's cool. All right. Besides Josh's Frogs, what's another brand or another business that's doing something really cool in the hobby? Like either a really cool product, or they're breeding really cool animals, or they're doing something unique. Like who's somebody that's kind of doing some cool stuff in our hobby?
Hail to Scale. They've got some really interesting frogs that they're working with.
Yep.
Some more uncommon Theloderma species and stuff. We just recently got a few more Theloderma stellatum from them that hopefully we can kind of restart that project at some point in the next year.
I really love people in our hobby that take something that not a lot of people are working with and really focus on it. That's really cool.
Yeah, that
does
seems
our
like
hobby
kind of
well.
what they're trying to do with their frogs.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, your favorite animal or plant in the entire world? What's something cool that you've come across or read about or seen in the last few months or years? What's the coolest thing that's on your radar as far as animals or plants right now?
My boyfriend and I just spent like 20 minutes just laughing at pictures of really ridiculous looking birds last night. If you haven't seen tawny frogmouths and also potus, they have kind of a similar aesthetic going on of just having giant eyes and a giant mouth, and they just look like cartoons, and their chicks just look like little grumpy cotton balls. They're great.
That's awesome. All right, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a baker, and then I found out about the early mornings, and then I said no.
That's awesome. All right, you have an hour of free time. No one's bothering you. What are you doing with that hour?
Probably reading.
Okay. All right. Anything special you're reading this summer? Anything that you're like, oh man, this is the best thing I've read in a long time?
Honestly, not really kept up with full length novels and such all that much since college. I'm kind of trying to work on getting back into that
Gotcha.
right now.
Gotcha.
I did recently finish Atomic Habits, and
Oh,
that was a
cool.
really interesting read. I've been able to kind of casually implement some of the tips from that book into my life
That's cool.
already without kind of going through for another round
Yeah.
to really soak it in.
Cool. I love that
But
book.
I do plan on doing that at some point here.
We'll add that book to the show notes. That's a really good book.
It is.
All right. If you have a bunch of people listening to you, what's one piece of advice or one piece of encouragement that you would give to people? So that could be something related to animal keeping, could be something related to life in general, but what's one piece of advice or one word of wisdom that you would, or one reminder that you would give us?
So the experiences that you've gotten and the knowledge that you've gained over time, like not everybody, I feel like, kind of always realizes that you can still like use that and credit that and own that. It's still yours, even if the situation that you gained it from was something that was not pleasant or it did not pan out, a failed relationship, a failed job, business venture, stuff like that. Whatever you picked up along the way, that's still yours. It doesn't count for nothing.
Yep. That's really cool. Thank you. That's really wise. Thank you for sharing that with us, Amelia. Check out some of our blogs, articles, videos. Amelia's been a part of a lot of those. She's dropping a lot of wisdom on a lot of different animals. So check that out at joshsfrogs.com. And thank you and have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy this content and want to stay up to date, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us across social media. We always want to bring you the best content, so let us know what you think in the comments. And for all your reptile and amphibian needs, be sure to check us out at joshsfrogs.com. We have an amazing selection. Until next time, stay curious, stay froggy, and keep exploring.